Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to section 3.1, solving systems of equations using substitution and elimination. Now, yesterday, you probably realized that graphing systems worked for some, but did not work for others. They got a little bit messy. Well, now we can use substitution and elimination. So let's go ahead and start with substitution. First, we have a system, y equals 3x, and x plus 21 equals negative 2y. Substitution works really well when you have a variable that's already solved for, such here we have y equals 3x. So when we have this, we're going to substitute this 3x in for y into the red equation. So I'm going to plug that 3x in for y. And now when I do that, what happens, it's just like a substitution in volleyball or football. Since I'm subbing in this 3x for y, because 3x is the same as y, I'm subbing that in for y, I have to remove that y. So then I plug in 3x right there. Now once you do that, you did the hard part. Now all we have to do is solve for x. So let's try and solve for x. I'm bringing this stuff down, so it's x plus 21 equals a negative 6x because I multiplied it out. Now let's get x's all on the same side. I'm going to subtract this x over to the other side. So I get 21 equals negative 7x. Then I divide by negative 7 on both sides. So now I get x equals a negative 3. And so here's one part. This is only one part of your solution. And why is that? Remember back to yesterday where we had a coordinate plane where we came up with two solutions. So now we need to find what y is. So I'm going to take this negative 3 and plug it back in for x, right? You can use this guy or you can use this guy. I'm going to use y equals 3x. So I take y equals 3, and then I'm going to take that times negative 3 because I'm just plugging it in. So now y equals a negative 9. So our solution would be negative 3, negative 9. Written as a coordinate point, it would be negative 3, negative 9. You could have also plugged in your negative 3 here, and you would have just had to solve for y. It would have been one step, but you would have came up with the same number. If you want to try it, feel free to try it. Number 2, now we're still using substitution. Sometimes these things won't be solved for. So we have to solve for our variable. So I'm going to look at this red equation. See where this y is by itself? Well, or y is not being multiplied by anything, I should say. I'm going to take this equation and solve it for y. So here I'm just going to subtract the 2x over to the other side. So I'm going to come up with y equals now negative 2x plus 7. Now I have y all by itself. So I'm going to take this y equals negative 2x plus 7. I'm going to take that negative 2x plus 7 and plug it in for y. I'm going to sub it in for that y. So let's take a peek at what it looks like. We have 5x minus 3, and then we're going to take that times what I'm subbing in for y. What I sub in, the negative 2x plus 7, the y has to come out, because it's just like substituting again on football or volleyball. And so that equals 23. Once you did that part, you did the hard work of subbing it in. Now we just have to solve this equation. So now we have 5x. Then we have a plus 6x minus 21 equals 23. Keep solving. We simplify to get 11x minus 21 equals 23. Add the 21 over to the other side to get 11x equals 44. Then we divide both sides by 11 to get x by itself, so x equals 4. So you found 1/2 of your coordinate point. Now we need to take this 4 and figure out what y is. So I'm going to actually take this 4 now and plug it in for that x because y is already solved for. Once again, you could use this equation or this equation, but there's going to be less steps when y is already solved for. So I'm going to plug it in for this x here. So I have y equals negative 2 times 4 and then plus 7. I simplify this mess to be y equals a negative 8. plus 7. Simplify it one more time. Y equals a negative 1. So now our coordinate point would be 4, negative 1. If you graph both of these lines, you would come up with 4, negative 1. Let's try one more with substitution. Now here, I do not have a variable solve for. Also, I do not have a variable all by itself. Then we have to go ahead and pick a variable to solve for. It does not matter what variable pick or what equation you pick to solve for, but there is ways to make it a little bit easier for yourself. Here, if I would look at b, for example, I would have to move the 2a over and then divide by 9. Well, I would have fractions hanging around. I don't like fractions. Here, I go down the red guy. Well, let's look at this 2a. I would have to move the 6b over to the other side, but divide by a negative 2. Does negative 2 go into these numbers easily? Yes, it does, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. So starting to solve for a, it's negative 2a equals a negative 6b minus 28. Now I have to divide by negative 2 because it's attached through multiplication, so I'm dividing by negative 2. And please, guys, make sure that we are dividing everything by negative 2. So a equals now a positive 3b plus 14. So now a is all by itself. I'm going to take this a, which is 3b plus 14, and go ahead and plug it in for, if I can draw a nice little line, all the way in for that a. So rewriting it, we have 2 times 3b plus 14, and then minus 9b equals 34. Now let's simplify. We're multiplying this 2 through, so it's going to be 6b plus 28 minus 9b equals 34. Now we're just going to simplify some more, subtracting the 9b from the 6b to get negative 3b plus 28 equals 34. We subtract the 28 over to get negative 3b equals a positive 6, divide by negative 3 to get b equals a negative 2. So there is part of our answer. Now we have to plug this negative 2 in for any guy that we pick. We can plug it in here, here, or there, and I'm actually going to plug this negative 2 in for this b. So we rewrite it as a equals 3 times negative 2 plus 14. Again, simplifying, a equals a negative 6 plus 14, and so a equals finally a positive 8. So our coordinate point would go something like 8 and negative 2 in parentheses. Moving forward, now we're going to use elimination. So elimination means that we are going to try to eliminate a variable. So looking at number 4, we're not solving for any variables now. Can we eliminate one of these variables, these x's or these y's, through addition or subtraction? Well, I see that we have the same amount of y's, so I can eliminate those using subtraction. And when you subtract, make sure we change all your signs. So I'm going to change all the positives to negatives and all the negatives to positives. So we subtract. So it's 5x minus 8x is a negative 3x. 3y minus 3y is 0, so I'm not even going to write that down, equals negative 19 plus 25 is a positive 6. Now I'm going to divide by negative 3, so x equals a negative 2. So I already found my x. My x is negative 2. But now we have to find our y. So I'm going to plug this negative 2 in for this x. Again, you can pick any guy, but I'm going to plug it in for the top one. So now we get 5 and then times negative 2, because I'm plugging in that negative 2, my x disappears, plus 3y equals negative 19. Solving for y, we get negative 10 plus 3y equals negative 19. 3y equals a negative 9, and y equals a negative 3. So we found both solutions. X equals negative 2, y equals negative 3. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, please remember, when you subtract, change all the signs. Change all the signs, positive to negative, negative to positive when you subtract. Looking at 5, again, when we use elimination, we want to see if we have any same amount of variables. Here our x's are different, but our y's are both 3's. Now here we have a negative 3y and a plus 3y. So since we have opposite signs and the same number, we're going to add them up. So when we add, we don't have to touch the signs. So we add our x's up, 4x plus 2x to get 6x. Negative 3y plus 3y is 0, so I'm not even going to write that down. And then negative 22 plus 16 is going to be a negative 6. Dividing by 6, we get x equals negative 1 for one part of your answer. Now, with this negative 1, we have to plug it in for one of these guys. I'm going to choose the top guy, so it's going to be 4, and then times negative 1 minus 3y equals negative 22. Solving for y, negative 4 minus 3y equals negative 22. Add the 4 over to get negative 3y equals a negative 18. Divide by a negative 3 to get y equals 6. So we found the other half of our solution. Y equals 6. And one more example here, still solving by elimination. Now we look at our guy. Do any of our x's or y's match up? No, they do not. So now what happens? We have to look. Can we multiply one of these y's or x's to get one of these guys? Can I multiply anything by 2 to get this, or 3y to get this? No, I cannot. So now I have to look for a common number that they can multiply to. So now I know I'm going to try to get my x's to match up. If I try to get my x's to match up, I have to take this guy times 2 and this guy times 3. So I'm going to take this guy times 2. And so when I do that, I get from here, I get a 6x minus 8y. I have to take everything inside those parentheses times 2. So minus 8y equals a negative 28. Now, since I took this guy by 2 to match the 6x, I have to take that times 3 because I'm looking at my 2x. So I'm taking this guy by 3. That whole equation by 3. So I get 6x plus 9y equals 6. Now I have the same amount, so I'm going to subtract. Remember, when you subtract, you can change the signs. Or if you wanted to, you could multiply this guy just by a negative 3. So now when I combine them, that is gone. Here I get a negative 17y equals a negative 34. So y equals 2. So there's part of my answer. Now I can plug it in for either of these equations. So when I plug it in, I'm looking at the top equation. I'm going to go 3x minus 4 times 2. And then that equals a negative 14. Simplifying, I get 3x minus 8 equals a negative 14. 3x, adding the 8 over to the other side, 3x equals a negative 6. So x equals a negative 2 for your complete answer. And so we found both parts of our answer. So we completed the problem. And that does it for section 3.1, solving systems of equations using substitution and elimination. Good day.